The house looked peaceful the first time I saw it. It stood at the end of a narrow street, clean and well kept, with white walls and tall windows that reflected the sky. From the outside, it felt welcoming, like a place where nothing bad could happen. When I stepped inside, the air was cool and still, as if the house was holding its breath. Life there followed a gentle routine. Every morning, sunlight entered the living room at the same angle. I made coffee in the quiet kitchen and listened to the soft ticking of the wall clock. The floors never creaked. The doors never slammed. Everything had its place, and nothing seemed out of order. At first, the silence felt comforting. But slowly, I began to notice something strange about it. The house was not simply quiet, it was controlled. Sounds did not echo. Laughter felt out of place. Even my footsteps seemed to fade too quickly, as if the walls were absorbing them. I told myself I was imagining things. People inside the house spoke softly and briefly. Conversations ended before they truly began. Questions were answered with smiles instead of explanations. No one argued. No one disagreed. It felt calm. Too calm. One evening, while dusting a shelf in the hallway, I noticed a family photograph. Everyone in it was smiling, perfectly still, perfectly posed. But as I looked closer, my chest tightened. One face in the photograph had been scratched out. Carefully. Deliberately. And no one ever mentioned it. It did not take long to learn the rules of the house. No one ever explained them clearly. They were not written anywhere. They were simply followed. I understood them through quiet reminders, gentle looks, and careful pauses in conversation. There were rooms I was not meant to enter. One door at the end of the corridor was always kept closed. When I once asked what was inside, the answer came quickly and softly, just storage. Nothing more. No curiosity. No details. Some topics were avoided the same way. The past was one of them. Whenever I asked questions about earlier years, the room seemed to tighten. Smiles appeared, but voices grew thinner. Someone would change the subject, offer tea, or speak about the weather. The question would disappear, but the discomfort remained. I learned when to stop talking. I learned not to ask why certain letters arrived and were hidden away. I learned not to mention names that made people look down at their hands. I learned that silence was safer than truth. At first, I followed these rules out of politeness. Later, I followed them out of habit. The house rewarded obedience with calmness. As long as I did not question anything, life moved smoothly. Still, unease settled quietly inside me. It was not fear. It was a slow pressure, the feeling that something important was being protected from the light. And the house, with all its rules, seemed determined to keep it that way. The cracks appeared quietly. At first, they were easy to ignore. A book I clearly remembered placing on the table was suddenly gone. When I asked about it, I was told it had never been there. The answer was calm, confident, final. I laughed it off, but doubt stayed behind. Then the stories began to change. The same memory would be told in different ways, depending on who spoke. Dates shifted. Details disappeared. What was once described clearly became uncertain, then forgotten altogether. When I pointed this out, the response was always the same gentle smile, the same soft voice. You must be mistaken. The house began to feel different after that. I noticed how people lowered their voices when I entered a room. How conversations stopped mid-sentence. How doors were closed more often than before. Even the silence felt heavier, as if it was listening. At night, I lay awake, aware of every sound. The walls no longer felt neutral. They felt watchful. As if they had seen too much and were trained to say nothing. I started doubting myself. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the house was only quiet, not secretive. But my chest tightened each time something disappeared, each time a story changed. The calm that once comforted me now pressed against my thoughts. Something inside this house was breaking. And whatever it was, it did not want to be found. I noticed the lock one evening when the house was unusually quiet. The door had always been there, at the end of the corridor, plain and unremarkable. I had passed it countless times without stopping. But that night, as I walked past, something caught the light, a small metal lock where there had never been one before. My steps slowed. I stood in front of the door and listened. Nothing. No sound. No movement. Just the familiar silence of the house, thicker here than anywhere else. I reached out and touched the door gently. It was cold, colder than the others, as if it had been closed for a very long time. When I asked about it later, the response came too quickly. "There's nothing important inside," someone said. "It's better not to open it." That was all. From that moment, the door stayed in my thoughts. I found myself walking past it more often, pausing without realizing why. At night, I dreamed of it, of standing outside while something waited on the other side, silent and patient. I noticed scratches near the lock, faint but deliberate, as if it had been opened and closed many times before. Once, I pressed my ear against the wood. I imagined I could hear breathing, or perhaps memory itself, trapped and unwilling to fade. The door became more than a door. It was a boundary, a warning, a promise that the truth existed hidden, protected, and afraid of light. And I knew then that whatever the house was hiding, it was hiding it there. The truth did not come all at once. It arrived in pieces, quietly, the way lies are built. One night, when the house was empty, I found the key. It was hidden inside a drawer beneath folded papers, wrapped carefully as if it carried weight. My hands trembled as I walked down the corridor, every step louder than it should have been. The lock opened easily. Inside the room, the air felt different, heavy, untouched. Boxes lined the walls. Letters, photographs, documents, years of life stored in silence. Faces from the scratched photograph stared back at me. Names I was told never existed appeared again and again. Dates explained the missing years, the changing stories, the rules without reasons. This house was not built on peace. It was built on careful deception. The lies were not sudden or cruel. They were slow, patient, and deliberate. Every smile, every gentle answer, every quiet rule was part of keeping the truth buried. They believed silence was protection. That hiding the past would erase it. I felt betrayal rise sharply in my chest. Not because the truth was painful, but because I had been living inside a story written by others. My memories had been shaped. My questions softened. My doubt dismissed. I closed the box and sat on the floor, surrounded by evidence of years I was never meant to see. In that moment, the house lost its calm. It was no longer quiet. It was exposed. And I understood then. This was not just a house with secrets. It was a house made entirely of lies. I did not leave immediately. For a while, I walked through the rooms one last time, seeing them as they truly were. The furniture had not changed. The walls were the same. But the feeling was different. The house no longer felt calm or powerful. It felt small, like something exposed under bright light. The silence no longer controlled me. I packed slowly, choosing only what belonged to me. With every item I placed in my bag, the weight inside my chest grew lighter. The rules that once guided my movements had no meaning anymore. The locked room, the hidden faces, the careful lies, they had lost their grip. When I stepped outside, the door closed softly behind me. Nothing dramatic happened. The house did not collapse. The street looked the same as always. And yet, something important had ended. Distance weakened what secrecy had strengthened. Away from the walls, my thoughts became clearer. My memories felt like my own again. I realized healing does not begin with confrontation. Sometimes, it begins with leaving. As I walked away, I did not feel victory. I felt relief. The house could keep its lies. They no longer needed to be mine. For the first time since arriving, I breathed deeply. The house stood behind me, silent, empty, and powerless. And ahead of me was something new. A life built on truth, not walls. Living in that house taught me a truth I will never forget. Silence can hide many things, but it cannot erase them. Lies may stay quiet for years, carefully protected by routines and rules, but they grow heavier with time. The more they are hidden, the more power they demand. I learned that truth does not disappear simply because it is ignored. It waits. It settles into walls, memories, and small details that refuse to stay silent forever. No house, no family, and no life can remain peaceful when it is built on denial. Understanding this did not bring anger. It brought clarity. The past cannot be controlled by silence. Healing cannot begin without honesty. And safety built on lies is never real safety at all. Now, when I think of that house, I do not feel fear or regret. I feel grateful that the truth found its way out. Because in the end, truth does not need permission to exist. It always finds a way into the light.